This is the latest piece of our Team Canada approach to make sure we have all hands on deck as we approach the challenge of the incoming administration. You are all true patriots, and I and millions of Canadians are deeply grateful for your commitment to our country.
Welcome back. We're tracking several developing stories at this hour, both the ceasefire in the Middle East, two more Liberal leadership contenders set to announce officially they are entering the race in the next hour or so, and of course, all eyes on Washington as we wait to see what the president-elect, soon-to-be president, decides to do tomorrow. That was the Prime Minister speaking to his Canada-U.S. Relations Council, a group that was brought together to help the federal government deal with that relationship, including, of course, the tariff threats. And former Canadian ambassador to the U.S., David MacNaughton, is on that council, and he joins me now live. Nice to see you, Mr. MacNaughton.
Good to see you too.
So, what do you think is going to happen tomorrow? If you had your best guess, what is likely to happen on tariffs?
Well, having lived through the first Trump presidency, I think the only thing that is predictable about Donald Trump is his unpredictability. So I think we have to be prepared for all eventualities, and particularly prepared for the imposition of tariffs, either on everything or, selectively or whatever. But, being prepared for any eventuality is really the most important thing when it comes to President Trump.
Is it surprising that we don't really know yet? I mean, you and I talked to lots of people, and nobody really seems to know what to expect. If we should just expect the 25% tariff, or it might be something different, or it might not happen right away. Is it surprising that we don't know yet?
No, I don't think so. I mean, when he threatened to put in the tariffs on steel and aluminum, I had a call from the White House the day before. They asked me, this particular person who was a senior person in the White House asked me if there was something I could do. They knew I knew the head of the steel workers and some of the steel executives. And I called around. He called me the next morning, 15 minutes before the press conference, said, I don't know what you did, but there aren't going to be any tariffs. And then 15 minutes later, Trump announced the tariffs. So wow. you just never know. And that's why I say it's really important to be prepared for any eventuality.
Okay, and in this case, as we've been telling people, Ottawa is preparing a first round, $37 billion, things like Florida orange juice, bourbon, those kinds of things. I have Wilbur Ross later in the show, and of course he worked closely as Secretary of Commerce. You would have known him. And he really thinks we don't want to get into a war. We don't want to get into this tariff war with the United States. Is there any other kind of response, or are we headed towards this trade war?
Well, we can't win an all-out, prolonged trade war with the United States. I mean, we are far more dependent on trade with them than they are with us. Sure. Having said that, I mean, the notion of simply sort of buckling to Donald Trump's threats is not a very effective way of dealing with him anyway. I mean, I think you've got to show that you're prepared to stand up and then, sit down, at the negotiating table and have a discussion about, what is he really talking about? Because what he talked about when he said he was going to impose the tariffs was that, it was concerns over the border, concerns about fentanyl. I mean, is that really what he's talking about? And then more recently, he said, the U.S. is subsidizing us to the tune of $100 billion. I mean, none of the above is true. So I think it's really important to figure out what is it that he needs out of this to declare a win. I think it'd be a real mistake to start putting, trade concessions on the table, right out of the starting gate. I think that it just encourage him to be more of a bully.
As I'm sure you know, the Alberta Premier has sort of taken a different stance than the other premiers because she doesn't want energy on the table. She doesn't want to use it as leverage. She doesn't even want it part of the conversation. I wonder what you make of that idea, given that it seems that that would be our strongest piece of leverage, whether it be oil and gas, electricity, whatever.
Well, I think in the current circumstances, whether it be premiers or whether it be businesses. I think everybody's, concerned about the impact on whether it be their own province or their own business. And so there is a tendency to, want to focus in on your situation alone. I hope that at the end of the day, we can find a way to, come together as Canadians and put a united front, because that was what was most effective in the first go round. And I understand Premier Smith's concerns, but I think at the end of the day, hopefully we can pull together with a united response, because the divide and conquer is part of the Trump playbook. So we'll see what happens.
You obviously, not only were you there for CUSMA, you were also there for the tariffs on steel and aluminum, and the former U.S. Trade Representative Bob Lighthizer has called you a highly skilled negotiator. So I wonder what you're telling people as part of this new council and as your role as a former ambassador about how you negotiate with Donald Trump, because again, this is just perhaps the beginning of that conversation, right, as opposed to the end.
Yeah, one of the things, and it was really key in the steel aluminum tariffs. Trump imposed those under Section 232, which says Canadian imports of steel and aluminum are a national security threat. And so I spent a lot of time with the national security establishment in the United States, the military and the intelligence people, and basically said, look, this is really shocking to Canadians, and I wouldn't keep those tariffs on for a long time, because if you do, we could become a national security threat. But Canadians don't take well to that kind of threat. And so, again, I get back to what is it that is really behind Trump's threats at the present moment? Is it we need to step up more on the military side? Is it that we need to, be more concerned about, certain aspects of trade? But it'll take time. I think the one thing that Canadians need to be prepared for is that this isn't going to be done, in my estimation. We're not going to solve this problem overnight. And so, but hopefully it also gets us to deal with some of the things in this country that we need to do in terms of getting our own competitiveness up, in terms of stepping up, in terms of security and defense. These are all things we should be doing anyway. Yeah. So if that's the side effect of all this, then it won't have been a bad thing.
Let me ask you, what if the goal for Donald Trump is those things are, yes, part of it, but what if the primary goal is to raise revenue, to be able to cut taxes and do other things he wants to do in the U.S.? It would seem if that's the case, there's really no argument we can make.
Well, I think, I know he loves tariffs. He says it's one of his favorite words in the English language. Yeah. I think in order to raise the kind of money that would pay for tax cuts and balance the budget and all the rest of it, it would create an enormous amount of inflation in the United States. It would have an impact on the stock market. And, once you saw those sort of impacts, I don't know how he's going to keep prices under control if he's got huge tariffs on it. It just won't work. So, we will see. But as I say, it could be that this takes a while for us to both, make sure that we are dealing with the impacts in Canada, but also we're making sure that we don't rush to put too much on the table that, as I say, he'll just pick up and ask for more.
And just a final question, Mr. MacNaughton, in terms of the impact here, the economic impact, I use words like devastating, catastrophic, recession, all those things do you agree with those characterizations that this is, potentially extremely damaging for the country?
There's no question that if it was a 25% across the board tariff on Canada, that would be devastating. I think the only thing that, we need to understand a bit, and that I certainly grew to understand when I was in Washington, is that would have a substantial impact in the United States too. Yes. And while Donald Trump right now is feeling the glow of his victory and everybody coming to kiss the emperor's ring and everything, the fact of the matter is that once it started to have any impact on some of the places that he won and everything else, he may modify his position. And a 25% tariff on all things going into the United States from Canada would definitely have an impact. On it wouldn't have as much impact as it will have on Canada, but it sure have an impact on the United States. So we'll see.
David MacNaughton, always good to get a voice of reason and expertise on this. Thank you. Come back anytime.
Thank you. Take care.